Imagine waking up in the morning, grabbing your coffee, stepping outside, and instead of sitting in traffic for an hour, your car simply lifts off the ground and flies you to work. No traffic jams. No crowded highways. No endless honking. Just a smooth flight across the skyline as cities pass beneath you. For decades, the idea of a flying car belonged to science fiction. Movies promised it. Futurists predicted it. But year after year, the dream stayed just that, a dream. Until now. Because an African inventor named Maxwell Chikumbutso claims he has built something that could redefine transportation forever, a real flying car capable of changing the way humans commute every single day. And if his technology proves true, the future of transportation might arrive much sooner than anyone expected. But before we understand the flying car itself, we need to understand the man behind it. Maxwell Chikumbutso is not your typical tech entrepreneur. Unlike Silicon Valley billionaires with massive research teams and endless venture capital, Chikumbutso built his innovations largely outside the global tech spotlight. Born in Zimbabwe, he spent years working on advanced engineering concepts that many experts initially dismissed as impossible. Yet over time, he began unveiling a series of technologies that captured attention across Africa and beyond. From self-powered energy systems to electric vehicles and industrial machines, Chikumbutso positioned himself as a bold inventor determined to reshape technology on the continent. But among all his projects, one concept stood above the rest. A vehicle that could move on roads like a normal car, and then take off into the air when needed. The idea sounds simple, but in reality, building a flying car is one of the most difficult engineering challenges ever attempted. Think about it. A car must be strong enough to handle road conditions, safe enough for everyday drivers, and affordable for ordinary people. An aircraft, on the other hand, must meet strict aviation standards, maintain perfect aerodynamic balance, and operate safely in complex airspace environments. Combining those two worlds into one machine is incredibly complicated. Weight distribution becomes critical. Energy efficiency becomes crucial. Safety systems must be flawless. And for decades, many companies tried and failed to make flying cars practical. Even major aerospace giants struggled to bring the concept into reality. Yet, Chikumbutso believes his approach could overcome these barriers. His vision is not just about building a flying prototype. He claims to be developing a new generation of transportation technology that integrates energy innovation, electric propulsion, and lightweight engineering. In demonstrations and discussions surrounding his projects, the flying car concept appears as part of a broader ecosystem of future mobility. A system where vehicles can travel on roads, take to the skies when necessary, and operate with minimal energy costs compared to traditional aviation. If such a system becomes viable, the implications could be enormous. Imagine living in a city where distance is no longer defined by roads. Instead of spending 2 hours commuting through traffic, you could fly across the city in minutes. Urban congestion could dramatically decrease. New types of transportation networks could emerge above our cities. Entire industries might evolve around sky-based commuting infrastructure. Landing platforms on office buildings. Air corridors designed for personal flying vehicles. Automated navigation systems guiding thousands of aerial commuters safely through the sky. It would be nothing short of a transportation revolution. But this raises an important question. Why would such a revolutionary idea come from Zimbabwe rather than traditional tech hubs like Silicon Valley, Europe, or East Asia? The answer may lie in necessity. In many developing regions, infrastructure challenges push innovators to think differently. When roads are limited and transportation networks struggle to meet growing demand, entirely new solutions begin to make sense. Instead of expanding highways endlessly, why not explore the third dimension, the sky? And Chikumbutso appears to be thinking exactly along those lines. His long-term vision suggests a future where African innovation plays a central role in shaping global technology trends. A future where engineers from emerging economies create breakthroughs that rival the biggest tech companies on Earth. And if the flying car concept works, it could become a symbol of that shift. Because once a practical flying vehicle becomes available, the world will not ignore it. Major transportation companies would rush to adapt. Governments would begin drafting regulations for aerial commuting. Cities would redesign infrastructure to accommodate sky traffic. And everyday people could begin experiencing something that once seemed impossible: driving into the sky on their way to work. But the flying car itself may only be the beginning. According to discussions around Chikumbutso's broader technology portfolio, the real transformation may come from the energy systems powering these vehicles. Traditional aircraft rely heavily on fossil fuels and complex maintenance systems. But newer electric propulsion technologies promise quieter, cleaner, and more efficient flight. If personal flying vehicles operate using advanced energy solutions, commuting could become dramatically cheaper than current aviation models. Imagine charging your flying car overnight the same way you charge an electric vehicle today. The next morning, instead of driving through crowded streets, you simply activate flight mode and rise above the city skyline. Within minutes, you're landing on a rooftop platform near your office. No traffic, no road congestion, just a seamless transition between ground travel and flight. Of course, turning this vision into reality requires overcoming several massive challenges. Air traffic management would need to evolve quickly. Safety regulations would need to ensure thousands of flying vehicles operate without accidents. Infrastructure would need to adapt. But technological revolutions often begin exactly like this, with a bold idea that seems impossible at first. Think about smartphones. Before the iPhone, carrying a powerful computer in your pocket seemed unrealistic. Think about electric cars. Many people once believed they could never compete with gasoline vehicles. Yet today, both technologies are reshaping the world. Flying cars could follow the same path: a slow beginning, followed by rapid adoption once the technology matures. And if innovators like Maxwell Chikumbutso succeed, the moment humanity transitions from roads to skies might arrive faster than anyone expects. Because the biggest transportation revolution of the 21st century may not involve faster highways or smarter traffic lights. It may involve something far more radical: a future where the sky above our cities becomes the new highway system for everyday commuters. And somewhere in that future, your daily commute might begin not with turning a steering wheel on a crowded road, but with pressing a button that lifts your car straight into the sky. And what makes this possibility even more fascinating is that Chikumbutso's flying car idea is not emerging in isolation. It appears alongside a growing wave of innovations that suggest the next era of transportation may look nothing like the systems we rely on today. Across the world, engineers are experimenting with electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, autonomous aerial taxis, and hybrid road-air machines designed to transform urban mobility. But Chikumbutso's concept pushes the idea further by imagining something deeply personal. Not just flying taxis operated by companies, but flying cars owned by ordinary people. Vehicles that sit in your driveway like any other car, yet hold the power to rise above the skyline whenever traffic becomes unbearable. And that shift, from shared aerial transport to personal sky vehicles, could fundamentally change how cities grow and how people live their lives. Because when travel becomes faster and less dependent on roads, distance itself begins to lose meaning. Living 50 kilometers from your workplace might feel the same as living 5 kilometers away. Suburbs could expand without creating traffic nightmares. Entire new residential areas could emerge in places once considered too far from economic centers. In other words, the flying car doesn't just change transportation. It changes urban geography itself. And as engineers continue refining propulsion systems, lightweight materials, and autonomous navigation technologies, the dream of road-to-sky vehicles is slowly moving from imagination into engineering reality. Which leads to the next fascinating question: if personal flying cars do become practical, what will happen to the massive global industries built around roads, fuel stations, highways, and traditional commuting systems? Because whenever a new technology rises, it doesn't just create opportunities. It also disrupts everything that came before it. Because if personal flying cars truly become part of everyday life, the ripple effects would spread far beyond transportation itself. Entire industries could begin to transform. Think about the massive global economy built around roads and highways. Governments spend billions every year expanding highways, repairing bridges, and managing traffic congestion. But if a significant portion of commuters start traveling through the air instead of on roads, the pressure on ground infrastructure could slowly decrease. Traffic jams, which currently waste millions of hours every day worldwide, could become far less common. Cities that are currently suffocating under heavy traffic might finally breathe again. But the changes would not stop there. Urban architecture itself could evolve. Office buildings might include rooftop landing platforms designed specifically for personal flying vehicles. Apartment complexes could feature aerial parking decks where residents land their cars after returning from work. Shopping malls could create vertical landing hubs, allowing customers to fly in and out without ever touching ground traffic. The skyline of cities could slowly transform into something humanity has never seen before, a network of elevated transportation routes where thousands of vehicles glide silently above the streets. And that raises another critical piece of the puzzle: safety. Whenever people imagine flying cars, one question appears immediately. What happens if something goes wrong in the air? This is where modern technology could play a major role. Many next-generation aerial vehicles are being designed with multiple redundant systems. Instead of relying on a single engine, they may use several electric propulsion units. If one fails, the others continue operating. Some designs even include automated stabilization systems and emergency descent technology that could safely bring the vehicle to the ground. Artificial intelligence may also become the invisible co-pilot inside these machines. Advanced navigation software could monitor weather conditions, nearby vehicles, and flight paths in real time. Instead of relying entirely on human driving skills, flying cars could operate with semi-autonomous or fully autonomous flight systems that drastically reduce the risk of human error. In other words, the vehicles might actually become safer than traditional road driving. And that possibility could dramatically accelerate adoption. Because once the public begins trusting the technology, demand could explode. Imagine the first cities where flying cars become widely available. At first, only a few early adopters would use them. Tech enthusiasts, entrepreneurs, innovators eager to experience the future. But then people would begin noticing something interesting. Those early adopters would arrive everywhere much faster. Their commutes would shrink from hours to minutes. Suddenly, the flying car would no longer look like a luxury gadget. It would look like a powerful life upgrade. And that's when the real momentum would begin. Automakers, aerospace companies, and technology firms would rush to enter the market. New companies would emerge, racing to design better propulsion systems, lighter materials, and smarter flight navigation. Governments would begin creating dedicated urban air mobility corridors to manage increasing aerial traffic. The skies above cities could slowly start filling with structured layers of movement. Lower altitudes reserved for short urban commutes. Higher lanes used for longer regional flights. Automated systems guiding every vehicle to its destination with incredible precision. And if Maxwell Chikumbutso's technology truly contributes to that transformation, his name could become part of one of the most important mobility revolutions in human history. But perhaps the most exciting part of the story is not just the technology. It's the idea that innovation can emerge from anywhere in the world. For decades, global tech headlines were dominated by a handful of regions: Silicon Valley, Europe, Japan, and later China. But today, a new wave of inventors and engineers from Africa, Asia, and other emerging regions is beginning to reshape the narrative. Ideas once expected to come only from wealthy tech hubs are now appearing in places many people overlooked. And that shift could unlock a completely new era of global innovation. Maxwell Chikumbutso's flying car concept symbolizes that possibility. A reminder that revolutionary ideas are not limited by geography. They are limited only by imagination, persistence, and the willingness to challenge what people believe is possible. Because history shows something fascinating about technology. The future almost always looks impossible, right up until the moment it arrives. Just think about the first automobiles. When early cars appeared in the late 1800s, many people believed they were strange machines that could never replace horses. Some cities even introduced laws requiring a person to walk in front of early vehicles, waving a flag to warn pedestrians. But within a few decades, the world changed completely. Horse-drawn transportation vanished from most cities. Highways spread across continents. Cars became one of the defining technologies of modern civilization. And now, more than a century later, humanity may be standing at the edge of another transportation shift. The transition from roads to skies. If flying cars become practical and affordable, the way people experience distance could change forever. Morning commutes could transform from frustrating road battles into smooth aerial journeys. Cities could become quieter, cleaner, and far less congested. And future generations might look back at our era the same way we look back at horse-drawn carriages, amazed that people once spent hours stuck in traffic on crowded roads. Yet despite all the excitement, the journey toward that future is still unfolding. Engineers around the world continue refining the technology. Regulators are studying how to safely integrate aerial mobility into existing airspace. Investors are watching carefully, trying to identify which innovations will truly shape the next generation of transportation. And somewhere in laboratories, workshops, and experimental testing grounds, inventors like Maxwell Chikumbutso continue pushing the boundaries of what vehicles can do. Testing new propulsion systems. Experimenting with lighter materials. Imagining machines that move effortlessly between ground and sky. Each prototype bringing the world one step closer to a future that once existed only in science fiction. Because the idea of a flying car is not just about transportation. It represents something deeper about human progress. For thousands of years, humanity looked up at birds and dreamed of flying. That dream eventually led to airplanes. Airplanes led to rockets. Rockets carried humans beyond Earth itself. And now, the next step might be bringing the freedom of flight into everyday life, not just for pilots or astronauts, but for ordinary commuters heading to work each morning. A world where the sky above our cities becomes part of the daily journey. Where the morning rush hour no longer crawls across crowded highways, but glides quietly across the skyline. And as more innovators join the race to build the first truly practical flying car, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The future of transportation will not remain confined to asphalt roads forever. Sooner or later, the sky will open up. And when that moment arrives, the question will no longer be whether flying cars are possible. The real question will be, how quickly will the world adapt once the road to the sky is finally open? Because history shows that when a technology truly changes convenience, adoption can move at breathtaking speed. At first, the idea always feels unusual. People hesitate. They question safety. They wonder if the technology is just a temporary trend. But then something happens. A small number of early users begin proving that the technology actually works, and more importantly, that it makes life dramatically easier. That's when the tipping point begins. And if flying cars reach that stage, the transformation of transportation could accelerate faster than most people imagine. Picture the moment when the first city officially approves daily personal flying commutes. At first, the skies might look almost empty. A few vehicles quietly rising above the skyline during the morning rush hour. People on the streets would stop and look up in curiosity. Some would film it on their phones. Others would shake their heads in disbelief. But slowly, the sight would become more familiar. Week after week, more vehicles would appear in the sky. And soon, something remarkable would begin to happen. The skyline itself would start to look alive with movement. Not chaotic, but organized. Structured aerial lanes guiding vehicles toward different parts of the city. Short-distance routes connecting neighborhoods. Higher altitude corridors linking entire metropolitan regions. And in the background, intelligent navigation systems would quietly coordinate everything, ensuring that every flying car knows exactly where to go and how to avoid other vehicles. This is where the real revolution lies. Because once the sky becomes an organized transportation layer, the limits of ground travel begin to disappear. Distance stops feeling like an obstacle. A person could live far outside the city center while still reaching downtown offices in minutes. Tourism could change dramatically. Imagine visiting a new city and seeing it not from a crowded tour bus, but from your own personal flying vehicle gliding above landmarks, rivers, and skyscrapers. Emergency services could benefit even more. Ambulances equipped with vertical flight capabilities could reach accident scenes far faster than ground vehicles trapped in traffic. Firefighters could access high-rise buildings from the air with unprecedented speed. Search and rescue teams could cover enormous areas quickly during disasters. In other words, flying vehicles could become more than a commuting tool. They could become a multi-purpose mobility platform that reshapes how societies respond to challenges. But perhaps the most profound impact would be psychological. For generations, people have associated commuting with stress. Long drives, endless traffic lights, crowded buses and trains. But imagine if the daily journey to work became something entirely different. A peaceful flight above the city skyline. The sun rising on the horizon as your vehicle glides quietly through the morning air. Instead of frustration, the commute could become one of the most enjoyable parts of the day. And that shift alone could change how millions of people experience their daily lives. But reaching that future requires something critical. Vision. Every major technological revolution began with individuals willing to imagine something others considered unrealistic. When the Wright brothers built their early flying machines, most experts believed controlled flight was impossible. Yet only 66 years later, humanity landed astronauts on the moon. The same pattern repeats throughout history. An idea appears. The world doubts it. Then engineers refine it. Investors support it. Governments regulate it. And eventually society embraces it. The journey from imagination to reality may take years, sometimes decades, but once the momentum begins, progress becomes unstoppable. Maxwell Chikumbutso's flying car vision fits directly into that pattern. Whether his specific design becomes the final solution or not, the concept itself reflects a powerful shift in thinking. The belief that personal transportation should no longer be limited to two-dimensional roads. That vehicles can move seamlessly between ground and sky. That everyday mobility can evolve far beyond the systems created in the 20th century. And as technology advances across multiple fields, battery innovation, lightweight materials, artificial intelligence, and autonomous navigation, the pieces required to build practical flying vehicles are slowly coming together. Each year, prototypes improve. Each year, engineers learn more about how to safely integrate aerial mobility into modern cities. And somewhere in research labs and engineering workshops across the world, teams are solving the thousands of technical challenges that still remain. The challenge of noise reduction. The challenge of efficient energy storage. The challenge of building vehicles light enough to fly yet strong enough to drive safely on roads. Every solution brings the world closer to a moment when flying cars stop being experimental machines and start becoming real consumer vehicles. And when that moment finally arrives, it could trigger a wave of change across transportation markets. Automobile manufacturers might transform into hybrid road-air mobility companies. Airports could expand their role beyond commercial airlines to include personal aerial vehicle hubs. New careers could emerge: aerial traffic coordinators, skyport engineers, airborne vehicle technicians. Even insurance industries would need to adapt to a completely new category of personal mobility. Because once humans gain the ability to personally access the sky, the ripple effects will spread across every part of the economy. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this transformation is how normal it might eventually feel. Today, the idea of owning a flying car sounds extraordinary, almost futuristic. But imagine a child growing up 30 years from now in a world where flying vehicles are common. To that child, the concept would feel completely ordinary. Just another form of transportation, just like cars, buses, or trains. They might even laugh when looking at old photos of massive traffic jams stretching across highways. They might ask their parents a simple question: why did people spend so much time stuck on roads when they could have just flown? And that question might perfectly capture how quickly technology can redefine what humanity considers normal. Because once a better solution appears, society rarely chooses to go backward. And that's why the idea of a flying car is so powerful. It doesn't just represent a new vehicle. It represents the possibility of a completely different transportation reality. A world where mobility is no longer constrained by asphalt and traffic signals. where the skyline above our cities becomes an open network of opportunity. And as innovators continue pushing the boundaries of engineering, one thing becomes increasingly clear. The dream of flying cars is no longer confined to science fiction. It is becoming an active race among inventors, engineers, and visionaries determined to reshape how humans move through the world. And somewhere within that race, ideas like Maxwell Chikumbutso's Road to Sky vehicle continue fueling the imagination of what might soon be possible. Because the story of transportation has always been a story of bold leaps forward. From horses to automobiles. From propeller planes to jet engines. From rockets reaching orbit to spacecraft exploring distant planets. Every era adds a new chapter. And the next chapter may begin the moment a commuter presses a button. Their vehicle lifts gently off the ground. The city shrinks beneath them. And the daily journey to work transforms into something humanity once believed could only happen in movies. A quiet flight across the morning sky. But even as that future slowly approaches, another fascinating question begins to emerge. If millions of people eventually start commuting through the air every day,